With only 300 breweries in the country back in 1991, it was a pretty exciting time to start. And the vision that Dan and Tom Schlafly had, Dan Kottman, Tom Schlafly, had to open the St. Louis Brewery,
right,
was simply to bring good beer, new beer, to St. Louis. They'd seen it done on the east and west coasts, other parts of the world in terms of the indigenous beers in Germany and England and Belgium, but St. Louis was poised and ready. They wanted to bring that to the people of St. Louis as soon as possible, not without some monumental hurdles.
So Stephen and I went to college together in Ohio and did some home brewing. Because Jimmy Carter legalized homebrewing in the late 1970s, and we went to college in the late 1970s, so homebrewing was legal. And then I went to work for a brewery in Scotland, and then moved to a brewery in London called Young's, and I was there from 1983 until we opened here in 1991.
I was invited to move to St. Louis in the early part of 1991, and I got out here in October, 2 months before we opened.
Was it that late?
Coming up on 25 years ago.
It was October. Wow.
It was October that I moved out here. The neighborhood was very different back then.
Oh, yeah. So I made trips back to St. Louis through the 1980s, and my dad and Tom Schlafly were law partners. And Tom had traveled in England and enjoyed the beers, and asked my dad at some point, you know, why aren't these beers being made in the US? And my dad suggested that we meet. And we met on one of these trips back to visit family that I made. And I recall being excited about the idea, but at the same time thinking this is a crazy idea. So we started talking about the idea 87, 88, sometime around then. And there were new breweries opening on the east and west coast, but not many. I mean, a handful, you know, one in every city, maybe a couple in Northern California or Oregon, Washington. The
official number, according to the BA, is 312 in 1991.
Oh, there you go.
And we're now at around 4,200 in 2016.
Yeah. Opening a new brewery in St. Louis was going to be different than anywhere else in the world, because St. Louis was one of the few American cities that still had a local brewery. It's just that that local brewery also happened to be the world's largest brewery. But a lot of St. Louisans considered Anheuser-Busch to be a local brewer, in so much as they permeated society in every way, shape, and form. And while it was a public company, it was run more like a monarchy, where everybody fed very well at the trough. And so we were going to be opening a brewery in a fairly unique environment. And so the model...
Understatement.
Yeah. Pretty unique environment. The model had to follow that. The model had to reflect the fact that we weren't going to be the only brewery in town. We weren't going to ever be the largest brewery in town.
For me, originally, you know, Schlafly started with the mindset of doing really high quality, classic European styles that were kind of absent from the US in that time frame. So, you know, both of the co-founders, you know, knew the European beer scene, knew that there was these beer styles that existed, and knew that there was a world well beyond the adjunct American lager that all St. Louis was getting, you know, at that time.
I mean, you got to have something. You got to have something lighter.
Yeah, the one commitment we said is we're not going to sell American light lager. And after,
now we have summer lager.
Still not American light lager. It's more of a European German Helles.
It's a lighter German Helles.
It's an all malt. It's an all malt Helles. The brewery I came from in London sold almost all of its beer through its own pubs. So we became very comfortable with the idea that, at least to start, we'd sell the beer over our own bar and create an environment in which people felt safe to try these beer styles that they weren't familiar with. So, like many early craft brewers in the United States, the goal was to introduce these beer styles to St. Louisans, who for the most part had never tried anything like a stout or a porter or a pale ale or a wheat beer.
I think when they started out, partially I think they just wanted to have a cool place to hang out and drink these styles of beers that they couldn't find anywhere else too.
Tom Schlafly was very committed to doing this in the city of St. Louis at a time when you didn't have a lot of people believing in the city at all. Most people had abandoned the city. So my task was really to find a building that would work. And we put a lot of faith in architect, contractor, and others who convinced us to buy this building that we're in today, which had been abandoned for 30 years and was heavily damaged by fire to the point where it didn't have, there was no floors or roof really to speak of in this building. If we go back to the late 80s, so a brewery could not own a retail license, so except unless it was Busch Stadium. So a number of different parties, homebrewers, Tom Schlafly, others, got a bill passed in the legislature to allow for a brewery, otherwise known as a microbrewery, as the law was passed, to open with a retail license. But there was a limit of 2,000 barrels, and the beer could not be sold off the premises. Today, having gone through successive efforts to change the licenses to make them more flexible, now a brewery can start up, brew as much as they want, have a retail license on the premises, and even self-distribute.
You're welcome.
We're known as the old enablers, essentially. Old enablers. So we enabled our own business. This is something you have to work at as well. So you have to make beer and make payroll and all the other things that it takes to run a small business, but you also have to pay attention to the state legislature because it's a regulated industry, and the regulations, unlike any other business, are set by the state legislatures, not by the federal government. So it's messy.
Fast forward to today, Schlafly has grown leaps and bounds beyond the original idea, but I think that original plan of doing really high quality classic styles is still the foundation of the company, but we've grown to, embrace more of the modern American brewing, which this room is a bit of a showcase of that. What kind of characters do we get out of wood? What kind of characters do we get out of different yeast, wild yeast, and fruited barrels? Earlier today I racked out a bunch of blackberry sour out of barrels. It still has a whole lot of blackberry in the barrels. We're going to see how that tastes publicly like next weekend. So programs like that, it's small scale for us still, but it's part of us as a company ever exploring, what is out there, what haven't we discovered.
It's good to come back to the standards too. So brew whatever you can to keep your business afloat, but I hear people again and again say, thank you for continuing to make the solid standards that aren't just the extremes, imperials, doubles, super this, super that.
Classic styles are classic now, but at a certain point they were innovative. And at what point do we as brewers stop innovating? I think there's definitely a segment of the market that is all about those classic styles. I think there's a huge segment of the market that is always looking for that thing they've never had before, that taste they've never had before. So trying to find that balance between the classic consistent styles that every time you open a Schlafly Pale Ale, it's a Schlafly Pale Ale, and then this interesting wild stuff that's going on. What kind of flavors are we going to get out of this? We don't know. We find out pretty much as the public finds out. We'll taste things, before it hits the taps, but it's just kind of a continual evolution of the company, as we try to stay true to the past, but also look forward and be agile enough to move within the market.
The day we opened was it was a soft opening for friends and family, so that the kitchen and front of house staff could learn the ropes and coordinate. The only beer we were serving that night, because I was bartending, was our Hefeweizen, brewed as unfiltered wheat beer. We filtered half the batch, which for years was one of our beers on top, our regular offerings, called wheat beer. It was the filtered version of the Hefeweizen. and we had pints and half pints. So we kind of had 4 beers you could choose from. To the public opening, we then got
Pale.
ESB.
Pale Oatmeal Stout Pilsner. And
It was
maybe
pretty
ESB.
lean. It was really lean when we opened.
we had 3 fermenters.
Tom Schlafly was standing in the bar here at the tap room.
Yeah.
When the crowd started chanting, we drank them
Yeah,
dry.
yeah, but that was-
And that was pretty early on, as I recall. We might have had a couple of those kegs of Boulevard still on
Yeah.
tap, but none of our beer, as
Yeah.
we were struggling to keep pace with demand. Suffice to say, that is a pretty clear example of the citizens of St. Louis and the region
Right.
wanted this. We could not keep up with production. We're the 3rd brewery in the state of Missouri, first one in St. Louis since Prohibition,
Yeah.
first brew pub
Brew
in the
pub.
state.
As long as you have your identity, and our identity is really comes back to really defining what craft beer means to consumers in St. Louis, which means really high quality beer, really good places to visit, really good parties, and also innovation now.
So we've seen things in the last few years like, grapefruit IPA. The combination of fruit and hops is still kind of a newer thing for both the American brewer and the American consumer, and so far people seem to like what they're trying. Other things that we've done in the last few years, like the Yakima Wheat Ale, Schlafly Hefeweizen is one of the classic, bedrock styles of the company, along with Pale Ale. But then you take that wheat beer, you add some nice new varieties of Pacific Northwest hops, and suddenly you have a whole different experience.
But the solid mainstays,
Yeah.
to us, the Schlafly beer, are critical.
The classic styles are really important to us, and I know the two of us at least, we'll fight to definitely make sure that we maintain them.
So it's always, finding that balance of the classic with the innovative side, and always at the top is the quality. As long as we're producing beer that we are proud of and stand behind, and we should be good.
Not just creating the next high ABV, high hopped IPA. It's about taking again that straitjacket off and saying almost anything goes for beer.
Again, we're such a big team, we collaborate on a lot of things. Like the grapefruit IPA, about a little over a year ago now, I was having a conversation with Dan, and he's got a longtime buddy that's at Oregon Fruit Company, and that's where we get our aseptic fruit purees, like for Raz, Hefe, some of the other things we've done, the blackberry, the apricot Berliner Weiss that we did last fall. So, we've worked with them a whole lot, and I was like, can they do like a grapefruit puree or something like that for us? And so Dan got on the horn, and they're like, yeah, that is something we totally want to do. So they made up a trial batch, they sent it to us. We made a batch of grapefruit IPA, kind of 1.0. Tasted it, kind of tweaked some things, made another batch, and every time we put them across the bar, we sold out like that. It's like, okay. We like what we're tasting, the public likes what they're tasting. Fast forward a few months, within 7 months of that little conversation and that question, we were starting grapefruit IPA production at BottleWorks. There's too many people involved in a company of this size to truly just have a beer be one person's. And you'll hear customers be like, oh, who brewed this? Be like, we did. We. Now we have PilotWorks, our little pilot system over at BottleWorks, where we do a whole lot of recipe development. And now we have the kind of stair-step system where, okay, we got a new idea, let's rock it out on PilotWorks, brew a few times, tweak it, step it up, bring it here, tweak it again, make sure we're really happy with it now that we brewed it on a bigger system, and then it can step up and go back to BottleWorks and go into production. So it's really nice to be able to have that system in place now where we can go from innovation idea to finished production product. You want to be creative, you want to try new ingredients, there's seasonal things, there's trends. Why are trends? We should explore this thing, and bring it back to like grapefruit IPA. There's a lot, we're seeing a lot more of these like fruit forward hoppy beers like out in the market now. And you know, we can be accused of being part of the trend, but at the same time, you know, if you don't try, you never know. So thankfully Schlafly over the years has embraced, you know, trying.
The large brewers, InBev especially, have decided they don't want to give up any more market share, and the growth of craft brewers has essentially come at their expense, a little bit with imports, but a large chunk of it at their expense. And you know, they're pushing back hard, and that includes, for example, at the state legislature. So if they can enact laws to limit the growth of small brewers, they're going to do that. And that has really surprised the number of small brewers who have invested millions of dollars, assuming that the legislative and regulatory framework is X and will stay the same. And it doesn't work that way. They are always looking, the larger brewers, just like any other large company, is always looking to create advantages for themselves, whether that's from a selling standpoint, a marketing standpoint, but also in the beer business from a regulatory standpoint. Well, you have to decide what your expectations are at the beginning, because the moment you sell beer outside of the door, you're competing with the world's largest brewer for tap handles for draft beer or shelf space for bottles and cans. And there's a way of, you know, reaching those accounts that focus on craft beers. You know, you don't need every convenience store to sell, or drugstore to sell your beer. You just need those accounts where the vast majority of the craft beer is sold.
You said long ago, Dan, if you're not having fun in the brewing industry, get out. Do something else, because there's more to it than that. It's a serious business. There's serious cash and money and advertising and quality and real issues. But at the end of the day, it's about beer.
And we're still a relatively small brewer. We're somewhere between 55 and 60,000 barrels. So we have that ability to still, from time to time, we can think small. It's figuring out what we're going to be. We're not going to be a national brewer, but we want to be more than just that brewer that sells beer over the bar. So, as I said earlier, when you want to be something in between, you got to be very, very clear about what you want to do, because you can't do it all. There's just not the resources to do it all. Got to pick your markets and pick your battles.
But you know, the portfolio, if you look back over the years, you know, there's constantly been changing, evolving, and you know, reacting to the market, but also helping drive the market.
Some people do have the impression that it was easy, and in some respects, it was very easy. And the reason it was easy was not that the business was easy, but we were having a lot of fun doing it. We made sure we enjoyed ourselves along the way. And to Tom Schlafly's credit, he did not place a lot of unreasonable expectations on us. He basically said, let's grow the business, let's keep going, let's keep doing what we think we can do, and let's enjoy the ride, and we'll see where we get one day.